And so one very, very important concept in astrotometry is the concept of what is actually moving. Because this object, if you consider this photon again, or this material object, when it goes from one place to another, when we perceive the movement of ourselves or of something through time, the underlying cause of that movement is its translation through hypertime. And so that same object in a different time undulates back through these waveforms, where it reforms in time-space from whichever of these waveform mechanisms you want to consider with the translation of the object. The space where it is may have absolutely nothing to do with its next moment in time. Its next moment in time may be someplace very, very distant from where it is, because this movement through hypertime, these hypertime translations through the common carrier, happen in an amount of time that is imperceptible, because they happen in between the wavelengths, the perceived wavelengths of the photon, or the perceived physical manifestations of the matter. And the most important thing to realize about this is that this object, while it appears to be the same object from moment to moment, is actually in a very different space and moved through hypertime in an indeterminate amount of physical time, in an indeterminate amount of time as we know it. Hypertime and time are not related in the sense that hypertime is any sort of replacement for time. Hypertime does not replace time. The concept of time in astrotometry, astrotometry narrows our concept of what time is. Newton created this when he defined movement. When he said distance equals rate times time, Newton defined time. He created time here. And astrotometry says that this distance has other components on the physical level, and that time itself is much different than what we thought it was. In astrotometry, time is strictly defined by the changes, the changes in the node patterns. In other words, the relative changes that can be observed among nodes describes time in astrotometry. Because you might have a pattern that appears to move away from another pattern. And that, while that might take an indeterminate amount of hypertime, an indeterminate amount of movement through actual physical space, there's a measurable time because of the changes in the frequency relationships. And so one of the goals for astrotometry is to reclaim the Cartesian concepts, the things that we lost, some of the things that we lost with quantum mechanics in the certainty about the nature of the physical space-time. What I would like to do with astrotometry, one of the goals for astrotometry, is to reclaim a sort of absolute space, an absolute time, using what we know, what we can learn about hypertime in order to compare the spaces in order to resolve the issues of relativity. See, right now, in modern relativity, relativity you have different reference frames considered to be three-dimensional reference frames. And when one reference frame is moving relative to another reference frame, if this reference frame has a velocity, we have to apply the special theory of relativity if the velocity becomes anywhere near the speed of light in order to understand what is observed in this other reference frame. So when you observe one reference frame from another reference frame, anything that's moving relative to anything else that's moving, there's this relationship that changes the apparent length and the apparent movement of the time that the object appears to be moving through. And this is the reason for this is the nature of hypertime. That if you compare the concept of a hypertime wavelength to the concept of the node pattern, we can derive the relationship between what we perceive as time and movement through hypertime as it is affected by the relative movements of the node patterns.